Three things never happened in Pinebrook. No one ever missed a church Sunday. No one left their doors unlocked. And no child ever showed up alone at a diner before sunrise until he did. By the time anyone noticed, he'd already become a fixture in the farthest booth, silent, starving, and strangely unreadable. And Margot Reeves? She was the only one who ever dared ask nothing, and somehow, that's what made everything unravel. Margot Reeves was 30 years old, a waitress at Juneberry's Cafe, a creaky, chrome-trimmed diner squeezed between a dusty feed store and a shuttered gas station in rural Missouri. Her days ran like a broken watch. Rise before the roosters, shuffle 6 blocks through the fog, knot a fraying red apron, and greet the dawn, drunk regulars with a grin that never quite reached her eyes. She lived upstairs from Becker's Pharmacy, in a one-bedroom that smelled like menthol and microwave soup. Her past was boxed in old photo albums, edges curled, colors fading. Her dad had died when she was 14, her mom just 2 years after. Aunt Jean, who raised her on casseroles and calloused love, had moved to Florida for her sciatica, leaving Margot with nothing but voicemail greetings and the occasional mismatched birthday card. It was on a frost-bitten Tuesday in early October that Margot first saw the boy. Couldn't have been more than tense-light, watchful, and carrying a silence thicker than syrup. He sat in the last booth, shadowed from the front windows, a second-hand backpack nearly swallowing his small frame. A book was always cracked open before him, the pages fluttering like he expected them to fly away. That first morning, he ordered nothing but a glass of water. Margot brought it with a smile and slid a paper straw across the table, her hand lingering for a second, unnoticed. He nodded just barely. A twitch, really. The next day, the same. The next week? Still nothing but that glass of water and eyes that tracked everything while revealing less than a locked diary. Margot picked up on the pattern. Every school day at precisely 7:18, he'd arrive just 42 minutes before classes started at Pinebrook Elementary, 4 blocks east. He'd read, sip the water as if it were soup, and glance up only when someone laughed too loud or dropped a fork. He watched pancakes stack, bacon sizzle, and toast steam on other plates. But he never touched a thing. Until day 15, when Margot accidentally set down a plate of cinnamon flapjacks. "Oh, whoops," she said, faking confusion. "Kitchen made an extra. Hate to waste it." The boy looked up, suspicion tightening his mouth, but hunger anchoring his stare. "It's fine," Margot said gently. "Sometimes Doug screws up the orders. Better on your plate than in the trash." She vanished before he could argue, ducking behind the counter and watching, as he slowly, almost ceremonially lifted the fork. 10 minutes later, the plate was bare. His eyes never rose from the book, but he whispered as she collected it, "Thanks." From then on, it was their secret ritual. Each morning, the kitchen accidentally overcooked. Doug would grumble but play along. Pancakes one day, scrambled eggs and rye the next. By November, it was oatmeal drowned in brown sugar and cinnamon. The boy never asked, never offered more than a soft-spoken thank you. But he devoured every crumb, sometimes like he feared it might vanish mid-bite. "Who's that kid you're always feeding?" asked Charlie, a retired delivery driver who claimed the corner stool like royalty. "Not sure," Margot admitted, "but he's hungry." "Feeding strays now?" joked Lacey, the grill cook, cornering Margot in the stockroom after the third weeknot unkindly. Just blunt, like someone who'd seen a few good hearts get eaten alive. "You keep giving handouts. They forget to be grateful. He'll ghost you. They always do." Margot didn't argue, just shrugged, folding a napkin she didn't need. "It's all right. I know what that kind of hungry feels like." It was the most she'd ever shared about herself in 3 years of grease-stained shifts. The boy never gave a name, and Margot never asked. Something in how he moved, careful, quiet, never turning his back to the door, told her questions would send him packing. So instead, she made sure the water was always cold, the toast still warm, and that for exactly 39 minutes a day, he had a place that didn't look through him. Some mornings, when the place was slow and the boy's book kept him absorbed, Margot would wonder, did he live nearby? Did someone wait for him after school? Why did he flinch when someone raised their voice, even from across the room? And why did hunger seem like an old friend he didn't trust anymore? But she'd shake those thoughts away. She'd learned early that kindness with strings wasn't kindness at all, so she carried on, their quiet contract, and over time, she noticed the boy's shoulders stopped hunching quite so tightly. His gaze met hers a second longer. Once, he even smiled barely, but it was there. And for Margot, that half-second of recognition was enough. Enough to convince her this mattered, even if no one else saw it. By week 6, others had noticed. Most said nothing. Some offered passive glances. A few couldn't resist spitting their thoughts like gum on a sidewalk. "Company charity now?" scoffed Rick, a local insurance rep with a stiff tie and a stiffer smile. "What's next? Free coffee for anyone who frowns?" "Kids today," grunted another. "Handouts for anyone with big eyes and empty pockets." Margot heard them, but let it slide. She knew better than to defend decency to those who thought empathy was inefficient. But her manager, Victor, was another story. One morning, he summoned her to the cramped back office, a cluttered cave, smelling like old invoices and instant coffee. His forehead glistened like a donut, but his tone was firm. "I've been watching this little breakfast charity," he said, tapping a chewed pen on his desk. "We're not a soup kitchen, Margot." She twisted her apron, heartbeat loud in her ears. "I'll pay for it. 1 meal a day, I'll cover it." Victor raised an eyebrow. "From your tips? You're barely covering your rent." "It's my choice," she said quiet, but with a steel edge he hadn't heard before. Victor stared a beat longer, then sighed, heavily. "Fine. But if he causes trouble or your work slips, it ends. Got it?" Margot nodded, relief blooming in her chest like spring after a bitter frost. She'd expected a scolding, maybe even a pink slip. But this deal? She could live with it. Every morning, Margot slipped a few crumpled dollars from her tip stash meant for a new space heater, or that dentist visit she'd dodged for 2 winter sand, paid for the boys' breakfast herself. Then came a bitter, bone-stinging Thursday in late November, and the boy didn't show. Not at 7:18, not at 7:20, not at all. By 7:30, Margot had checked the front door 7 times, each glance wrapped in quiet dread. Still, she plated his usual banana pancakes this time and placed it gently at his empty booth, as if habit might summon him. "Waston food," muttered Lacey as she passed, shaking her head like she'd been proven right about something. By close, the untouched pancakes sat like a forgotten offering. Margot boxed them up and took them home, unable to throw them away. The boy didn't appear the next day either, or the next. A full week passed. Silence where he once sat. Margot started to wonder if Lacey had been right. Had the boy simply wandered off like lost things always did? The thought left an ache she couldn't name. She hadn't known his name, not his backstory, nothing. But his absence left the kind of silence that made your ears ring. "Called it," Lacey said on the 10th day of his disappearance, Senote smug. Not cruel, just sure. Like the world was always this way, and kindness always had an expiration date. Strays don't stay, not when the bowl's empty. Around that time, a middle-aged man in a plaid windbreaker kept snapping photos of the empty booth. She didn't think much of it until the next day. A Facebook post began circulating an image of the booth, with a caption that stabbed sharper than sarcasm. "Juneberry's Cafe, now serving invisible children." The comments rolled in like cold water down the back. Marketing stunt. Trying to make it look like charity. Feeding fake kids to score tips. Next time a kid walks in alone a run. Margot never thought herself thin-skinned. But those words? They stung. That night, curled up on her couch beneath a worn blanket, she questioned herself for the first time. Had she been naive? Feeding a stranger without knowing a thing about him, was that foolish? Or was she just looking for a piece of her own history to rewrite? Needing something solid, she reached for the box under her bed. Inside, her father's photograph worn, sun-faded. He stood in a desert, grinning in an army medic's uniform, smile kind even in that dust-choked world. Beside it, his leather-bound journal cracked at the edges, pages rippled with time. She flipped to a familiar page, Her fingers traced the words she'd memorized since girlhood. Shared a half ration with a village kid today. Logan called me crazy. Said the boy might tip off insurgents. Maybe. But the way he ate reminded me of Mom saving me the last biscuit during the ration years. We don't grow poor by sharing our bread, but forget how to share and we're poor forever. Margot stared at the page, her father's looping script suddenly feeling louder than every comment online. She didn't need the boy's backstory. Hunger didn't come with a resume. And whether it grumbled in the gut or echoed in the heart, it didn't ask for questions. It asked for bread. Nobody knew the boy's name. Nobody recognized the woman behind the booth. But for a handful of mornings, somebody wasn't hungry. And if that still meant something to anyone out there, type hope. On the boy's 23rd absence, Margot trudged into Juneberry's like clockwork. Her expectation had long cooled into routine, but still she glanced at the door at 7:18. She didn't expect him. But she still looked. Quietly, she plated a small batch of pancakes and placed them at his usual booth, just in case. At exactly 9:17 a.m., everything changed. It started with the silence, thick, sudden, like the diner itself held its breath. Margot, pouring coffee at a booth near the window, looked up. 4 sleek black SUVs rolled into the gravel lot like chess pieces, government plates flashing beneath the morning sun. They formed a perfect arc at the entrance. People froze mid-bite. Outside, passers-by slowed to rubberneck. Uniformed men emerged in sync, each stepping to attention beside their door like it was a drill. Then, from the lead SUV, a man stepped out whose presence pulled every gaze. His posture demanded attention before the medals on his chest ever sparkled. Tall, with sun-worn skin and eyes that had seen deserts, death, and long silences between gunfire. He wore the formal attire of a high-ranking military official, his ribbons and badges catching the morning light like fireflies trapped in glass. He paused only a moment, scanned the front of the cafe, then strode toward the door, flanked by 2 younger officers. The bell above the entrance rang too loud, too bright for the hush inside. Victor emerged from the office, pale and twitchy, adjusting his tie like it might shield him. Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, voice a note too high. The senior officer removed his cap. "I'm looking for a staff member," he said, voice calm but with the weight of command. "A woman named Margot." The entire place turned toward her. Coffee pot in hand, Margot stepped forward, her throat dry, her stomach suddenly weightless. "I'm Margot," she said, trying to keep her tone steady. The man's face softened not by much, but enough. "Margot Reeves?" She nodded, setting the pot down before her hands betrayed her. "My name is Colonel Samuel Hart," he said. "United States Army Special Operations Command." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a pristine envelope, thick, official, and sealed. "I'm here because of a promise made by one of my men." He held the envelope out. "This contains a letter from the Commanding General of Special Operations and a personal message from Adam's father." "Adam?" she echoed, the name strange yet oddly heavy in her chest. "The boy you've been feeding," Colonel Hart said. "His name is Adam Weller. His father was Master Sergeant Bryce Wellerone, of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command." The past tense hit Margot like a punch to the ribs. "Was." It echoed through her like thunder in a narrow canyon. "I don't understand," she said, voice tight, her hands unmoving, not yet reaching for the envelope. "Is Adam okay?" "He's safe," Colonel Hart assured her gently. "He's with his grandparents now, up in Durango, Colorado." He paused. "But for nearly 3 months, he came here, every school morning, after his father was sent overseas on a classified mission." As the words settled, Margot's thoughts churned like puzzle pieces snapping together. The boy's quiet, his watchful eyes, his tightly guarded silence, it wasn't just shyness. It was survival. What Sergeant Weller didn't know, the colonel continued, was that his wife left shortly after he deployed, vanished, abandoned the boy. Margot's breath caught. Adam was too proud, too afraid someone would take him away, so he told no one. "He got by on scraps," Hart continued. "Used the emergency money his dad left behind. He stretched it, out-survived off ingenuity and instinct." A hushed ripple of disbelief moved through the diner like wind rustling through wheat. Margot felt her chest tighten. Adam now with a name, a story had been quietly waging war with hunger and loneliness, right under her nose. Sergeant Weller was killed 2 months ago in northern Afghanistan, Hart said quietly, his voice clipped by military discipline, but not without sorrow. In his final letter, he left us a mission. He opened the envelope, pulling out a creased sheet of paper handwritten. The ink faded, the edges soft. "If I don't make it home," the colonel read, "please find the person who's been feeding my son. Adam told me about her in every letter, said she never asked questions, never made him feel like a burden. She just brought him breakfast, every day. Tell her, she didn't just fill a stomach, she preserved a soldier's son's dignity." Margot took the note with trembling fingers. Her eyes blurred as she tried to read it for herself, heart pounding like it might escape her chest. She barely registered the colonel's voice continuing, distant and warm. This letter was read aloud at Sergeant Weller's memorial. "When Adam finally told us about you, the entire Special Operations Command vowed to find you, to say thank you, in person. What you did," his voice faltered just a little, just enough to land. "What you did for the child of one of our own, without even knowing it meant something to all of us." The diner was still now, not a coffee stirred, not a breath misplaced. Even the people who had mocked Margot weeks before sat frozen, jaws slack, their faces a mirror of guilt and awe. Colonel Hart stood taller, back straightened like steel. Then, in a single fluid motion, he snapped into a formal salute. Behind him, the other uniformed personnel followed suit, their right hands rising with reverence. "On behalf of the United States Army Special Operations," the colonel said, "on behalf of the brothers, in arms, of Master Sergeant Weller, and most of all, on behalf of Adam, thank you." Margot stood motionless, overwhelmed. Her world had been built from pancakes, eggs, coffee pots, and loneliness. But now, in the span of a moment, her quiet service had become something vast. She had unknowingly fed a boy in survival mode. She had unknowingly honored his father's final wishes. "I didn't know," she said finally, voice barely above the hum of the fridge behind the counter. "I just couldn't let him go hungry." The colonel nodded solemnly. "Sometimes, Miss Reeves," he said, "feeding a child without asking why, that is the most heroic thing of all." And then, outside, the dine reverie soldier who had stayed with the vehicles, still as statues, raised their hands in salute. Inside, the entire room rose to their feet, their silence louder than applause. Margot Reeves, the almost invisible waitress from the sleepy side of town, stood in the center of it all. In her hands, she held the last message of a father to the woman who had made sure his son survived more than just hunger. Her small kindnesses had become an anchor, tethering a child to dignity and a dying soldier to peace. The week after the colonel's visit transformed Juneberry's cafe in ways no one could have seen coming. Word spread like prairie, fire mouth to mouth, screen to screen, paper to paper. Even the same Facebook group that had mocked her a week earlier now reposted the colonel's words and Sergeant Weller's letter with thousands of comments and shares. Regulars began requesting Margot's section specifically. Some left folded napkins with generous tips and handwritten notes. "My son's a Marine. Thank you for what you did." Or, "You reminded me why kindness still matters." Victor, who had once worried over a few missing pancakes, hung a small flag above Adam's booth. Beneath it, he affixed a modest plaque, reserved for those who serve and those who wait. From that day forward, the booth was never empty again. Veterans, active duty soldiers, and families passing through sat there, often quietly, always respectfully. And when someone clearly needed a meal but couldn't say so, the staff didn't ask, they just brought breakfast. Exactly 1 week later, a manila envelope arrived for Margot. Inside, a note written in pencil on lined notebook paper, the letters slightly crooked but careful. "Dear Miss Margot, I didn't know your name until the day the colonel came. But for all those mornings, you looked at me like I wasn't broken, like I wasn't invisible. Dad used to say heroes wear uniforms, not capes. But I think sometimes they wear aprons too." When his letters stopped, I thought the world forgot us. But you didn't. You remembered me, even when I couldn't explain why I was alone. My grandparents are nice. They're teaching me to fish. Grandma makes cookies. But I miss Dad. And sometimes I miss your pancakes. Thank you for not asking questions when I couldn't answer them. Your friend, Adam Weller. P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending after all. Margot framed the letter. Not front and center. Not for attention. But behind the counter, where she could see it during the slow moments. When curious customers asked, she'd simply smile and say, just a thank you note from someone special. News of the cafe's quiet link to the Special Forces made its way through military channels. Soldiers on leave, passing through Missouri, often made detours just to sit in Adam's booth. Many left behind unit patches or challenge coins as tokens of gratitude. These were pinned to a growing board behind the counter, an ever-expanding mosaic of respect. 3 months later, a local elementary school visited the cafe after a field trip. As Margot refilled glasses, an 8-year-old girl with curly hair and wide eyes looked up at her and said matter-of-factly, "My dad says you're a hero. Do you feel like one?" Margot smiled and slowly knelt beside her, looking the girl in the eye. "No, sweetheart," Margot said softly, kneeling down. "I'm just someone who remembers what it feels like to be hungry." She paused, then added, "Not just for food." The girl's teacher, having overheard, offered a gentle nod. "That kind of hunger," she said, "comes in many forms." Margot looked up, her eyes meeting the woman's understanding flowing between them without the need for more words. It was true. Hunger wore many faces, and food was only one of them. As summer neared, Juneberry's Cafe hosted a fundraiser in honor of military families. Donations poured in, enough to start a modest emergency fund for children with deployed parents. To everyone's surprise, Victor matched the contributions dollar for dollar. Later, he approached Margot, sheepish. "You know," he admitted, "I never understood why my dad was always feeding the neighbor kids. Drove my mom nuts." He chuckled quietly. "But I think I get it now. Sometimes a hot meal, it's more than food." Then came a quiet Tuesday morning. Nearly 1 year to the day since Adam first entered the cafe. Margot clocked in early, tied on her apron, and found something metallic resting on her order pad. A military challenge coin, polished, heavy. One side bore the insignia of Special Operations, the other, custom engraved. Semper Memor, always remembering. Margot scanned the room, but the cafe was empty. She stepped outside, letting the early morning breeze lift her hair. The American flag above the door rippled softly. No black SUVs, no uniformed men. Just the quiet stretch of street coming to life. Lawn sprinklers hissed. A dog barked down the block. The school bus rumbled in the distance. She slipped the coin into her pocket, its weight grounding her. A reminder that kindness, when offered freely, often echoes back in unexpected ways. That evening, as she unfastened her apron and hung it by the door, she noticed Victor placing a new sign in the front window. It was simple, honest. "Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry." When he saw her watching, he shrugged, a little embarrassed. "New policy," he said. "Figured it was about time." Margot smiled, her heart full. No speeches, no declarations, just action. Just the kind of quiet that truly mattered, an unspoken vow to see the need in others and respond with grace. Food without strings. Kindness without inquiry. She walked home beneath the bruised gold sky, the challenge coin pressing gently against her hip like a secret. She thought of Adam, now safe in Colorado, fishing with his grandparents, maybe eating cookies and sleeping through the night, carrying his father's spirit. Yes. But, she hoped, also carrying the knowledge that even in the darkest corners of a small town, someone cared, someone noticed. Not everyone who helps wears a badge or a uniform. Some carry plates, some refill water, some offer nothing more than silence and pancakes. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. You don't need to be remembered. You just need to be there when someone's starving for food or hope. You might forget this story tomorrow. That's okay. But if no one retells it, then the kindness in it fades into silence. So if you believe stories like this still matter where compassion, memory, and quiet justice endures, subscribe for more. And once, on a morning just like any other, a young waitress gently placed a warm plate of pancakes in front of a quiet boy. "Same as always, sweetheart," she whispered. "No charge." She never asked who he was, never asked what he was running from, never asked what he'd lost. She just fed him. And on that very morning, while the coffee brewed and the town stirred, 4 black SUVs pulled up outside the cafe. A man in full military dress stepped out, a folded letter pressed gently in his hand. Who were they? Why did everyone freeze? Well, that's the part that made this ordinary story unforgettable.